Well, thanks everybody for taking your time out of your day to get a chance to see what we've added in JMP Clinical 18. So this is kind of what I'm going to highlight for today. It's not an exhaustive list, but I think ones that are worth mentioning to everybody. So we'll start off with something that might have been in 17 that we updated. This is the algorithmic aFMQs risk report. We've reintroduced risk-based monitoring and made some updates to it. So we'll cover that. Also, we'll just kind of briefly go over the visit order and patient recruitment. We reintroduced those in version 18 as well. And then we'll kind of end with a bunch of new things, such as a drug-induced liver injury report, subpopulation builder tool, a data mapping tool, and something we call a JMP Clinical Recoder. So let's begin. Just to let you know how I'm going to do this, I'm going to just present a kind of a slide or two with maybe a quick screenshot as an example, and then we'll go see it live. So I'll go back and forth between these things. So this algorithmic aFMQs, this risk report, we actually had it in version 17. And the idea was when the FDA released back in 2023 in August, this idea of FDA medical queries with preferred terms mapping to specific kind of redefined medical queries. They also included something called algorithmic components. So some of those medical queries had algorithmic terms. And so we incorporated those things. In 18, we've separated them out. So any of those sex-based ones, they'll separate it out. And we've increased the performance. So just by an example, it used to take a couple minutes to run. Now it takes like tens of seconds to run, which is nice. So we've really improved that. So I want to just kind of show you what that looks like real quick. And here we are. Let's take some cardiolipine here real quick as my example. Here it is. So our algorithmic FDA medical query report, or aFMQ. So as soon as I click on this, it's going to run and throw it into my little window here. That tells you right now I need to have a treatment variable set, which I didn't do. So let me change that real quick. And this is something that's kind of new in 18 as well. When you go into here, every study has study level preferences. So that'll affect it, like treatment variable here. So there we go. I say, okay. That should be nice. And I'll just reset that report and then it'll run. And so the idea here is that we've kind of extracted, there's an Excel macro sheet that's available. And inside some of those sheets that refer to the medical query, there's little boxes that talk about algorithms. And so we take those preferred terms, look at the algorithm that's defined, and then we map it. And so we'll take a look at this from a risk plot point of view. So we'll see here that we have percent kind of occurrence here. We will have our risk difference here as our forest plot here. And then we'll see there's a color coding too. So the cardiolipine is blue in this case, and placebo is gray. And that's our description of planned arm, something I didn't define. And again, the idea behind these risk reports is to look at, is it greater in treatment versus control? In this case, the far right would be greater in treatment versus control, but also some confidence intervals. And so if these confidence intervals kind of overlap, they kind of zero risk, then it's kind of suspect if that's real or not. But there's still a big difference between our treatment versus control. So maybe something to look at. But this percent of occurrence is also nice to see. This is where we have it occurring in this case, hypoglycemia and placebo, and also in our treatment in the cardiolipine. As mentioned, the new thing here is being able to separate out those algorithmic aFMQs based on sex. So if they're female specific, we'll see here. If they're male specific, they'll be below that. And then we've separated out those as well. So we can see the medical query as well as the terms and the rules that apply. And this is more obvious here, the algorithmic medical queries below. Then we'll see it's any preferred term as well as some, or some algorithmic component, which in this case is plasma glucose greater than 180 milligrams per deciliter. So anything that matches that, then we'll count it up, right? How many patients, and then give kind of the percents in here as well. So that's what we have for that. I'm going to move this off to the side. So what do we have next? So another thing we have is risk-based monitoring. So in the past, we have had this ability, and we had a different way of displaying things. And so we decided to refresh this, see if we can give it a more graphical approach while still maintaining kind of this stop-like approach, with red being high risk, yellow being medium risk, and green being low risk. So let's take a look at that. Here, I'm going to go back to finding that. Here's my risk-based monitoring. And I'll click on OK. And in this case, we're going to be prompted. It's not going to automatically run. So that's one of the differences you'll notice from older versions to newer versions. As soon as I add a report, it automatically runs. But there are some that you need to make choices first. This is one of them. So I got to have a default. Let's use my nicardipine example. I have some supplemental data. So there's a path for this. You can see it's in my own personal path. And there's a folder for this. So here's the example we'll use. And then I run. What we're going to see is really more a tabbed view. We're going to see one that's more of a heat map, as we'll see here, and then one that's more of a bar chart. So I'm going to close down our options here. And now we have this kind of quick way of looking at what we call the site level indicators. And we'll group them too. And so nice nested thing. So study site identifier on the X and the different risk indicators on the Y axis and grouped within the overall or enrollment, right? Or safety or supplemental. And it's filterable too. So if I only want to look at a subgroup like supplemental, I could do that. I click on that and now I see only the supplemental ones. And sometimes that makes it a clearer picture, especially if you have a lot of supplemental or operational type risk indicators here. And again, we'll pause over our cursor and we'll be able to see what is the metric and what is the signal. Again, 3 meaning high risk, 2 meaning medium risk, yellow, and 1 or green meaning low risk. An alternative version of this then would be the bar chart. And again, we can filter these things down either by site. Right? So we can clear that. Everything's shown. And maybe I look at it per site. And then I will see the categories again. And then the bar chart is the risk value. But it's color-coded based on what the rules are. So just because it has maybe a low risk value might be bad. Or it could have a high risk value, and because of the threshold set, it could be red, meaning a high risk. And so again, based on these threshold settings, as well as the mean of the risk value. A nice kind of new, very graphical way, and we'll continue to enhance this as people give us more and more requests about this.